It's my great pleasure now to fast forward to today and welcome Sean Summers, who is the CEO of the Pick n Pay Group. So what we're going to do now is unpack a bit of what we've just seen, kind of, I think, any CEO's worst nightmare in many respects. But before we do, can you give us just a brief overview of what the situation was like in 2003? And kind of let us into your brain a little bit and tell us what helped you and what made you take those decisions, those very difficult decisions, to recall these three products for public safety.
Well, first of all, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome. This is truly the graveyard shift, so thank you for sticking it out. Yeah, I suppose you get, when you look back in your life and over the times of your life, there are some defining moments and occasions that happen to you, like sort of meeting your wife for the first time and coming to the conclusion you are going to marry her, or the birth of your first child, my daughter. And certainly this would be one of the things that is indelibly etched in my mind, because it's one of those moments that you realize that the world is a lonely place at the end of the day, that if you are in a position of leadership, that these situations do present, and that you're now confronted with the reality of how you're going to deal with it, and how you're going to react going forward. And clearly for us in the beginning, the note that we received from the extortionist is very clear in the instructions that we were given in that note, and that was simply that we were to contact absolutely nobody, that the burner phone that was in that box would need to be carried by myself or my associate Donnie, but by either one of us, and that we would be contacted. So you kind of initially sort of almost in the horns of the dilemma, well, what do you do? Do you just sort of accede to this demand or not? But fortunately, because I was one of the founders of Business Against Crime in South Africa, I had a very senior into the police force in our country. And I managed to get the services immediately into the forensics and the police. We sent the goods away to be examined, and sent to the police forensics department. And yeah, we got the feedback from the police that they had done the tests and there were in fact levels of cyanide in there, and that we then entered into a process of engaging the extortionists. So for nearly 7 weeks, we had to carry this infernal bloody telephone around with us. So I had my first lesson of how these things can irritate you and become devices of torture. But this went on for quite a protracted period. This cat and mouse game of actually trying to catch the extortionist.
And this was a real test of your leadership. A test for leadership that nobody's ever really prepared for, I think, as they become CEO of a company like Pick n Pay. So what were some of the key decisions that you were making at that time to ensure that people were safe and that you felt that you were making the right decision that you could stand by?
Now, it's, I think maybe it comes back to some of the basic instincts that we taught by our parents growing up. And my father always taught me that in life you just simply do the right thing and you suffer the consequences. So when you are confronted with these sort of situations, you take what I call the village square decision, whereas you kind of think to yourself that if you were sitting in a gathering and you had your grandmother and the priest and the people that you really respected, your headmaster or your headmistress, and they had the same body of knowledge that you had, what would their decision reasonably be? Because you know that with the passage of time, everything will become known, and that the decisions that you do take are going to have to stand to scrutiny at some point in time. And I think if you're guided by the simple notion that you take the best decision at that point, with the information that you have, with the full array of information that you have, I think that you're not going to be found wanton in terms of the decision that you take.
I know that I've got lots of questions. I think everybody in the audience is going to have a lot of questions too. So you've kindly said that we're going to have a bit of a Q&A at the end. So if you do have questions, keep them in your mind, and we've got obviously some microphones in the room that we'll be handing out. But what I was wondering is, though, you were able to make those decisions, but then you had to communicate that right through the organization, make sure everybody aligns with what you're doing when you're also in a situation that's really unknown. You didn't know how things were going to fold. So how did you make sure that everyone aligned and did so fast?
It was quite a fast learning curve, but fortunately in our country we do play cricket, and I used to field in the slips, so you get quite adept at getting a curve ball coming the wrong way at you. But I think that the first thing that you need to take on board when this does happen, in any crisis like this that confronts an organization, is that you as the leadership has to take the lead. You can't delegate this to legal or to the PR department or to some third-party thing. You need to stand up very, very clearly and show that you're in control. And I liken it to an aircraft. You know, if you're in an aircraft and you're really going to hit real bad turbulent weather, and you kind of sort of manage to stick your head up front in the cockpit and you find, well, the cabin steward's actually flying the airplane, you're not going to feel very comfortable as a passenger. So as the chief pilot of the company, you need to take control. And the most important thing, and you see, when you talk about 2008 to today, it's dramatically different today because of social media and the fact that you need to control the narrative. Now, the reality is, how do you get the truth out there, and what is the source of truth at the end of the day? Because there are so many, many, many sources of disinformation. You've got bad actors, you've got bad players, and I mean, it could even be your opposition who could be using this, you know, in a sort of a nefarious way to a degree. So you have to control the narrative, and that's why what we did, we at great expense, we basically bought all of the dominant media space in South Africa. I mean, we announced it on the Sunday night to the country when we realized that we now had to go public with this thing, and the extortionists had now changed their plan of attack. We went out on all of the national TV stations on the Sunday night. We hit all of the major newsprint and stuff as well. So we blanketed the media in the country at great expense and basically took the country into our confidence because it's what you owe them. So, you know, people may well ask the question, well, why didn't you do it in the beginning when the extortionists first engaged with us? And, you know, when you deal with the authorities, you find out that this is not the first instance that these things happen. And then you get a case of cry wolf. You know, it's like sort of food recalls. You have to be careful when you do food recalls that there are really genuinely recalls. Otherwise, you keep on getting a knee-jerk reaction to situations. And then one day when you have a serious food recall, then people, you know, it's, so you have to be very careful.
So you had to weigh up. So you had to weigh up so much when you were kind of deciding on this kind of approach of ultra transparency in some respects, and going, you know, completely openly on the media and talking about this as we saw on the video. What was going through your mind?
Well, you know, the CIS is this august institution, used to be called. I was, in fact, this had been going on for a protracted period of time. We had this sort of 7 weeks of frantic engagement. And then we had a complete quiet period with this thing, we didn't hear anything. And I'd been asked to do the closing keynote address at the CIS in Barcelona, 1,700 delegates. And the only people who knew about this in the company were the two of my executives concerned, myself, my chairman, and some of the risk people that we had involved. And I actually said to Raymond, I said, I don't think I can go to Barcelona to do this. He said, well, Sean, you've heard nothing for 3 months. Go and do the closing keynote address. You need to get a break as well. You guys have been under huge pressure. I finished the keynote address in Barcelona, and on the Friday night, I got a telephone call from one of my colleagues there to tell me that this product had been placed in store. So I literally got on a plane on the Saturday night. I had to charter a plane from back to London. I got on the plane that Saturday evening, Sunday morning, we shot the TV commercial and launched it on Sunday evening. So your mind is spinning at 1,000,000 miles, but I don't know, you just kind of work out in your own mind what the correct and appropriate steps are. And in terms of engaging and taking the country into our confidence, I mean, we had a crazy conundrum because, for a lot of people, there's obviously a fear. So you have a look at sales in the beginning taking a dip, which is understandable. I mean, you've got mothers with young kids and all of these sort of things. So we had that. We had our sales declining in the store. And then we had the crazy thing that our share price was going up. I mean, this is sort of completely sort of counterintuitive. And in fact, my chairman, who was overseas at that stage, the late Raymond Ackerman, the man that we all loved. I mean, Raymond was sort of calling me and saying, Sean, I see the sales are going down, but the share price is going up. So I said, I can't explain this to you. It doesn't make any sense to me either. But, you learn one thing, just how fragile life is. And, I'll never ever forget one of the first things that really sort of hit me in the head when I looked at this box and I looked at these goods and we would kind of tip them out on the table and flicking them around with a pen. And then you think to yourself about tamper-proof packaging and all of this thing. And then you think, well, anybody with a hypodermic needle and a syringe can go into a store and inject an orange because you're always going to have bad actors in the world. But, transparency, I mean, we talk a lot about it here in this forum here. And this is really, I think, that all of the work that this organization does is very valid and vital. But I think of all of the work streams that are done here, the GFSI is so crucial to what we do because it's at the heart of what we do. I mean, we at the end of the day feed the world. And that's why the responsibility for this is so serious. So for all of us in these things, transparency, honesty, openness, because you can build a reputation over 40 years. Trust me, you can lose it in 40 seconds. It's that quick. You take the wrong decision, and by God, you will regret it for the rest of your days.
But you will have been faced, so now with hindsight, you kind of go, okay, I made the right decisions. But if you kind of go back to the ethical dilemmas that were playing out in your head when you were considering the recall, when you're weighing that up against public fear that you might, that you had engendered, danger to sales, share price, etc. What, you had a few solid kind of ways to help you, direct yourself through this. But what were some of the key strategies that you began to put into place?
Basic gut instinct. I mean, to be honest with you, we didn't have a book. It's hard. I was asked so many times after that, and there were a lot of companies where the board asked me to come and speak to them and just sort of share my sort of instincts and how we'd stepped our way through this. And I said, it is so difficult to write like a sort of a, dummy's guide for extortionists or this sort of situation because everything will present in a different way for different companies in terms of the way that it manifests. I mean, this was a completely different situation where we had a proper bad actor who was looking to try and extort some sort of advantage out of us. And, in your sort of typical breakdown within the food chain, something has happened there. Everything is different for every company in every situation. But it comes back to the leadership, and that's where the leader in the organization absolutely has to take the responsibility.
Did you know you had those leadership skills when this happened?
No, but you just know you have to do it. And here's the other single important thing as well. I allowed nobody in the company to speak to anybody other than me. For the very simple reason, you and I can take the exact same brief. You can have a meeting with journalists on that side of the room. I'll have a journalist that side of the room. We will say the exact same thing. Trust me, there'll be two totally different stories written based on the tone of how you presented it, how you looked. Did you look fearful? Did you look in control? Did you look calm, et cetera, et cetera? So the communication is so vital. And that is why I think that in today's world, it's even more complex, where is the ultimate source of truth today? It is just so, so difficult. And as an organization, I would say that the company has to take a shed load of money and dedicate it to this thing and own the narrative. You need to control the narrative, and you need to be the source of the truth, and the leader needs to lead.
So if we look at some of the lessons that I'm kind of extrapolating from what you're saying, it's like control the communication, control the narrative. always have your North Star as trust, transparency, and openness. But if you were to face a similar crisis today, or anybody here, and I really obviously hope not, but what would your key bit of advice be? What would you say to people? What were your major lessons that you took from that?
The major lesson that I took from this in the beginning is that you need to have a far better basis of knowledge of the subject matter at hand. Unfortunately for us, our forensic services in South Africa in the police division didn't do us proud in terms of the analysis work that they'd done, because they hadn't established the proper base levels of what cyanide base is. Because, if you look, cyanide's in water. In fact, one of the highest natural occurrences of cyanide is in Australia's most horrid, what I call their national flower, stem of broccoli. So if you look at broccoli and almonds, they contain amongst the highest levels of natural cyanide, naturally. So when you actually have a look at the levels of cyanide that were in these products, so when they said these products had been contaminated with, I think you would die of a lot of other conditions before the cyanide would kill you. You'd have to ingest so many sardines and garlic flax to achieve that. But the fear for us was that even in the process of contaminating, so if you take fish product, actually drill a hole in the can and then put solder on there to show that it has now been tampered with. You've now got the very real situation. You could have botulism poisoning in there, which could be even far worse. So yeah, you just have to very, very quickly weigh up and assess what the realities are that you are confronted with in these things. And then you kind of have to come back to the village square. I come back to that, but so many people have asked me, but how did you think about these things? How did you, and it was simply that, I thought to myself, well, if my mother and my granny and the people that I really respected in life, the priest and all of these people, had the same body of knowledge as I had, what would this decision be?
Amazing. Look, I'm going to go one more question, and then I'm going to come to you for some questions. But first of all, it was when we're talking about this idea of leadership, and I think this is really what it kind of boils down to, how the response of Pick n Pay and how Pick n Pay bounced back so successfully. It must have also worked because you created a culture within Pick n Pay that what you said was listened to, that there was one line of communication, that there was also trust in what you were deciding and the decisions you made. So talk us through a little bit of the culture back in 2003 and maybe how it's kind of been born through till today.
Again, maybe it's something that I've just, a value that I've lived my life by. I've always believed that the truth always sets you free. When you ask somebody a question and they need to think about the answer, then you're dealing with somebody who's a little bit of a stranger with the truth, because they're trying to remember what they told you last time so that they can kind of condition what they're about to say to you now. So I've always believed that the truth is the only real commodity in life. And it's always been the way that I've always, in my career, building up in the company to finally, when I became CEO, that my team always knew that about me, that it was that simple. And that's always been our culture in the company. It's just get on with it.
Get on with it, and as you certainly did. Look, do we have any questions? We have got some microphones, 4 sets of microphones. It's quite difficult to see here with the lights, but if you do have a question, do raise your hand. If not, I have plenty more. Yes, we do have one, sorry. Please do pass the microphone over there. And if you could say who you are, that would be fabulous. Or was that a little bit of a false start? Okay, well, so then I would just like to go back to 2003 and how this all unfurled. So you were sitting in your office, normal day, and somebody delivers.
Normal day, and next thing, Donnie and Alan walked into my office, and when I say they were literally grey in the face, they were ashen grey, and they had this little cardboard box, and there was a note, and he'd obviously opened the note already, so I took the note and read it, and the note basically said there are 3 products inside this box that are being contaminated, and unless you follow instructions, I will go about placing these products randomly in your store network. And there's a burner phone in the box, and you can hang on to the burner phone. You need to keep it with you 24 hours a day. And we'll be in contact for further instructions. And that's what happened. So for the next 7 weeks, we had to hang around with this instrument of torture while they were trying to triangulate and catch the extortionists. That was the first advice that we got from the police services. And I mean, you have to go back. And I mean, in a situation like this, you can't just be that Solomon-like that you can just take as profound a decision as this, just purely on your own. So I engaged with the police services, and this was the advice that they gave us, and it's what we did. But when the products were placed at store level and the customer phoned, and then we realized he'd obviously upped the ante and changed the game. So yeah, it was not the best few months of my life, I can assure you.
I bet it wasn't. And when you had to make those decisions, you said they were based on gut instinct. But did you ever question what you were doing? Did you ever just say to yourself, oh, this isn't the right decision? Is there somebody you were able to really kind of speak through this? You said you had this kind of culture of trust at Pick n Pay.
I mean, sure you have. I mean, you have your very small group of people because we had to keep it very tight. It's the old story in life, you know, 2 people can keep a secret if one's dead. So you have to keep it very, very tight. Because, you know, if this thing gets out in the wrong way, I mean, then it's even a bigger mess. So I had my small group of very tight group, but, you know, ultimately the leader, you have to take responsibility and you have to accept the consequences.
So how would this translate then? Because we say 2003, social media is obviously not around. We've just kind of got the first mobile phones pretty much.
Yeah.
What would you advise now? Because you know, a threat like this would probably take place on social media.
Yep.
How would you rein that in? Would you use the same channels? Would you, because you're dealing with a very different situation at that point.
You are dealing with a very different situation, and what I would do is I would set up within the company, I would have my own social media site within the company. So, you know, I would have the official sites that people can come into for information. And I would clearly disseminate out there to everybody, okay, that if you want the definitive source of information, it's us. So we had a situation, I mean, we've got 65,000 people that work in our company. We've got 60-odd million people in South Africa, and now this is national news everywhere. So when we broke this, the next weekend, on the Friday, it was a Saturday morning, I get a telephone call from the big Sunday newspaper, from the editor, well, not the editor, from the lead journalist there, and he says, we have it on good authority that the extortionist is a disgruntled ex-employee. So I said to him, well, I can tell you that that's not the case, okay, because I'm on the inside of this thing and I'm in contact with the police authorities. And he said, no, we have corroborated, we've had this story, because you know what the journalists are like, they just get somebody else to corroborate it and they can run with it.
We usually have 2 sources.
In fact, I contacted the editor of the Sunday Times, Monley, and I had all of their numbers. And when this thing broke, I contacted every editor of all of the major publications. All of the major journalists had my cell phone number. I would rather they call me 11 o'clock at night and get a clarity than run a story that's misguided or misshapen. I'd rather they'd phone me for a clarity than do that. So they all had my numbers. So I phoned Monley and I said to him, Mr. Monley, I'm just telling you now, okay, this is nonsense. You guys are going to publish in that newspaper tomorrow a fallacious story. And I said, what you're going to do is you're going to cause an enormous amount of concern across the length and breadth of this country and amongst my 60,000 employees. And I'm not going to have to dedicate all my bloody time at the start of next week now to deal with this. Anyway, they ran the story. Long story short, 2 years later, I was very fortunate to win the South African Businessman of the Year award, and I'm at this wonderful gala black tie event in the Sandton Convention Center, and it happens to be sponsored by the Sunday newspaper and their financial publication, the Financial Mail. So this is the most prestigious business award that you can get in South Africa. And I get called up to the stage, and Monley is the guy that hands over the award to me. So I thanked him very much, and I told 1,000 people sitting in the auditorium the story. That's about this august publication. So yeah, you know, you really, you have to be forthright. You have to be resolute, and you just have to be brutally honest.
And do you think your leadership style has changed since that experience?
It has changed quite a bit. I've got my 49th wedding anniversary next week, so it certainly has changed quite a bit. No, I don't think so. I don't think so. You know, it's. I mean, I'm back at Pick n Pay now. So I mean, I left the company 17 years ago, and I'm back at the company now. And I think, I mean, I've got Cindy sitting in front here. I've got my beloved Cindy. When I came back to the company after 17 years, Cindy has always been running our food safety stuff for us in the company. And Cindy said she's pleased to see me back because my previous leaders hadn't applied their minds too diligently to this area. Because this is an area that is so serious for us, and reputational risk is so serious for us. And you know, part of reputation is just that. It is a security of honesty, and it is that people can trust you. And you know, people know if they're dealing with people that are flaky. You can see it in their eyes when you talk to them, straight away. So.
And the figures, obviously, we saw on the video, the kind of trust in Pick n Pay basically soared after this experience. Did that surprise you, or were you expecting that in some respects, saying, well, you know, I was completely honest with everybody, and I did my very best to actually expose what I knew to the public?
It certainly did surprise us when we saw what was happening in terms of the investors and the marketplace and everything. And once things stabilized, I mean, our sales came rocketing back. They came soaring back again, and even to a greater level. So I think in terms of establishing a new level of trust and a bond with the consumer in the country, you know, certainly, that did achieve that. It absolutely did achieve that.
And do people still remember this experience when you were in South Africa? Do people still associate Pick n Pay with this this kind of attempt at extortion?
No, that's still, I mean, for the younger people, obviously not. But I mean, for people still around, I mean, it still is remembered. It's still used as various test studies, and things are written up on how to handle crisis situations and stuff. So certainly, is it something I want again? No.
But it's certainly something you could probably deal with a lot more confidence, I imagine, or maybe not.
No, I've been through a couple of situations post that, and there's nothing that's quite equaled it thus far. So it certainly does sort of certainly puts a new perspective when somebody comes to you and says, I've got a problem. My first question is, well, compared to what? So then, you know, you sort of sit down and unpack it. And, you know, I don't know, I think you really just need to simplify things in life, because things are so complicated today. So much stuff gets lost in this crazy world we live in. You know, I mean, I look at Google. I mean, it does a lot of good stuff, but I mean, for me, it's a fountain of all stupidity. Because, I mean, everybody knows everything, but they really don't actually understand all that much at the end of the day. So, having just good old basic common sense, which is not so common anymore. You know, the AI, I mean, we had a long call now, the board now talking about this beautiful new world of AI. So when I came back to Pick n Pay, and I was back on the board of the company and CEO, and I'm now the oldest CEO in the Johannesburg Stock Exchange, everybody was like, well, how's this old geezer going to deal with, you know, this new technological world and AI? And I'm like, AI? Been working with artificially intelligent people my whole life. You know, I'm just looking for some real intelligence. You know, this is just, yeah, it's extremely advanced machine learning, and I don't trivialize it. But how one sorts out the smoke and the smoke and mirrors that are always put into these things. So I think just a simple thing, and if I could say anything for me about leadership, it's just try and cut through the noise and just try and distill it down to what are we talking about. For me, it's served me well. It's served me well all my time.
And also has served Pick n Pay very well. Well, with that, I think we'll close off our conversation. But I think, you know, the salient point that comes through again and again, as you said, is trust, honesty, and common sense. And I guess if you're in a crisis, control the narrative. And those are all issues that were relevant in 2003 and are just as relevant today, and I think will be for a very long time as well. So thanks so much for your honesty in sharing this story with us, because I think it's extremely important this time of misinformation, of disinformation, to remember those values are integral to us as human beings. So thank you very much indeed.
Could I just say one thing in closing, as the co-chair of this along with Dirk? I just want to thank all of you in this room for all that you do in this space. You know, I think that when you have a look at where we are in the industry, I mean, the two real givens at the end of the day, and as I said in the beginning, the consumer is not here today, and that is the most important person at the end of the day. They're not here, so I mean, we shoulder the responsibility for all of them. But you know, there are three givens in this room. I mean, there is the source and the manufacturer of food, and then there's us at the retailers at the end of the day facing the consumer, and then there's the middle piece, you know, the food science and the food safety and all of those processes that sit in the middle. And I think that our appeal is a simple one, that, you know, we need to collaborate far more, where we do have issues that are sticking points and become sticking points. We just really need to get those out on the table. And the other thing that's really served me well in life, in every situation, is I always try and genuinely and truly put myself in the other person's shoes, because you need to try and get a perspective of why is it that this is a non-negotiable for them, so to speak, because it's only when I can try and get an understanding of what's driving that for them that we can then kind of get to a conclusion, because on the flip side, I need them to be in my shoes and understand why, for me, it's a non-negotiable, so to speak. And then you can deal with it, you know, and you can get the thing sorted out. So I think that for a lot of the groups and the sessions that have been had here, I think that we're starting to make far better progress within this industry. And I think that one of the things that we're going to need to do is to work out as to how we get more clearly understood base standards across the industry. Because this is not a compete issue for us. This is absolutely a non-compete issue for us. So I just want to thank you for all that you do. And you can all give yourselves a round of applause. So thank you.
Thank you very much.